Well, I'm back with a good friend, an old friend. You can see him right there. He's over on my right. That's our good friend Murad, that handsome looking guy from the Middle East, still plugging away. And though you think he's been quiet, he has not been quiet. In fact, he has been doing something that should have been done years ago or centuries ago. He has been going back to the Quran, and he's been taking and looking at the Arabic in the Quran. Now remember, he's a native speaker of Arabic, and he's been going back looking at how the translations have bastardized or adulterated the English translation. In other words, how they have changed and really corrupted what the Quran is really saying. Let me give you some examples. Here, I have right here George Sale. This is George Sale, very famous. This is probably the standard work for the last century or so. This is what everybody used for so long. That has actually been adulterated. Here is Arbery. This is one of the best ones today. Arbery is the one that I was brought up of when I did my studies there in seminary. We were all told to use Arbery because he is the best. He is what the NASB does to the Bible, he does to the Quran. And I always thought this is a great translation. Now, more recently, then we have this one here, which is called the Taqi Din al-Hilali in Khan. We call it the Hilali in Khan. This is the one that I've been using, oh goodness, at Speaker's Corner. I was just at Speaker's Corner a week and a half ago. And this is the one I've used everywhere because this is the one the Muslims like. Now, I know that much of the translation here is what we call apologetical translation. It's a mistranslation. But I had no idea just how mistranslated this is. Nonetheless, this is the one that they all like to use, that you have to use. Then I have over here what they call the Quran Project. This is the Quran done by the Quran Project in English. This is supposed to be a great translation, but it is mistranslated. And probably the best one, the one that everybody wants to use today, is Droke, A.J. Droke. He has been by far the most fair because he has taken the Quran and he has used what he thought were the right words to use. But here's the problem. In every one of these cases, every one of these Qurans that I've just put up, intentionally or unintentionally, they have looked at the Arabic and they've used what they thought is the right Arabic because they were using what the standard Islamic narrative says that word is, or what the Islamic traditions say that word is, or what Sharia law says that word is, or this word, or that phrase, or this meaning, or that verse. So in every case, they have done what we've been saying you must not do. If you want to find out who Muhammad is, or where the city Mecca is, or even where the Quran is, you go back to the century that man Muhammad lived, right? You go to the 7th century. You go back to that century that that city existed, Mecca existed, right? Have you heard me? I'll say this over and over again. Murad and I have been saying this for years. And certainly, if you want to find out what the Quran means in the Arabic that's on the pages, you go back to the Arabic of that time. You go back to the Arabic of the 7th century. Do you see? To me, that should be a no-brainer. Any historian, any linguist, anybody that's involved in textual criticism needs to use the text and be critical using the text of that century, using the text of that place. And the text in the 7th century was Arabic. And the Arabic that was there only at that time had no dots and vowels, as we said over and over again. It only had consonantal text called the Razm. And it's that consonantal text that we have failed to do and had failed to go because we have assumed that that which the Islamic traditions have imposed on those words, the meanings they imposed on those words in the 9th, 10th, 11th, and even later, that's the meaning that was intended by the original authors. When that is not the case, can you see how idiotic that is? We would never do that with the Bible or with Hebrew or with Greek. You would not take modern standard Greek and impose it onto Koinonia Greek. You would not take modern standard Hebrew and impose it back on to pre-AD Hebrew. You would take the Hebrew of that day, Masoretic text. You look at the Hebrew of the Masoretes in the 10th century, and then you compare it with the Hebrew that we have get from the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of that Hebrew, and you get many different words, many different meanings between the Septuagint from the 2nd century BC and the Masoretic text from the 10th century AD. If that is the case, and we do that with the Bible, we should do the same thing with the Quran. You've got to go to the Arabic that is from that time period and from that place. And that is what Murad has done. And that's why we need to go and thank Murad, because you're the first. Murad, are you there? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I am enjoying your speech, and the very difference between the Quran translations and the Bible is that the biblical translation, it has a concordance, so it has a very strong foundation that it's built on. But Quran translations do not have concordances. They have hadith and they have the sin, the stuff that comes in later. So of course, this has no linguistic value. That's the problem.
Did you hear him say that? This has no linguistic value because it's already coming with a bias. It's already coming with an imposition. So we need to take that imposition off. We take that bias off and go to the original meaning of these words. And that's what you've done, haven't you, Murad?
Yes, exactly. I have created a concordance from scratch, and it's as if I made myself forget the Arabic that I already know and started with the words right from scratch and didn't assume anything. And any word mentioned in the Quran, I see it in every single context, and that makes it much easier to know exactly what the author was meaning at that time without any standard Islamic narrative.
You hear? Did you hear what he said? At that time. So you went back to the archaic meanings for these words. Am I correct?
Yes, and I've also looked at poetry, which is ancient, how they used to understand these words, because that was also old. That gives you much better uh, conclusions than going to the standard Islamic narrative, which is hundreds of years later.
Bingo. And as we're going to find many hundreds of years later, in some cases, 5 to 1,000 years later, but that's for another subject. Let's get back to what you're doing. So, Murad, you're really, I mean, I don't know of anybody that's done this. You're the first to have done this.
Yes, exactly. I just want to give a very simple example for the English-speaking world to they will automatically know what I'm talking about. The word gay, it used to mean someone who was joyful back
I
in the
agree. I'm
50s.
gay, joyful.
Yes, back in the 60s and the 50s. But today it only means homosexual.
There you go. So, from being, hello, 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 I'm gay, to it is now pretty much being someone who is a homosexual. Can you see right there? The word has changed in the English language. Here's another one. You've got a bad set of threads. What does that mean today? Well, if you go to New York City and say he's got a bad set of threads, that means you've got a really nice looking shirt. But bad is now good. Thread is the shirt. So even those words have changed in modern English, and that happens all the way through with every language. And you're saying with Arabic, it's done the same thing, hasn't it?
Yes, so in today's mind of the Arab speakers and people looking at the standard Islamic narrative, it's as if they assume that the word gay has never meant someone who is joyful. It only means homosexual, which is wrong. So in the Quran, it's as if the word gay means joyful. This is my translation, the primitive meaning of the word, without the standard Islamic narrative.
Okay, now by doing that, you have found some amazing problems with today's translations, haven't you?
Yes, exactly. And not to mention the inconsistencies also. I'm just talking only about the wrong translations that stem from them believing the sin standard Islamic narrative and relying upon hadith, which is much later, and not focusing on linguistics.
So what we're going to be doing through this series, and we're going to break it up. We're going to break it up into about 7 different categories. We may break it up into others, but you have put these differences, these errors, these mistranslations into 7 categories. Am I correct?
Yes, exactly. There are 7 categories.
I've got the categories up here. I'm going to put them up on the screen. We're going to be getting to it again, but let me just put them up there so that people can see. The first category are clumsiness or lack of detail. And you're going to unpack that, aren't you, in your PowerPoint?
Yes, exactly.
And then you're going to go to Bible obsession. You're going to unpack that in your PowerPoint. And then you're going to go
Yes.
to, you're going to show how the standard Islamic narrative, how these words are based on that interpretation of these words.
Yes, exactly.
And then you're going to go to mistakes and masking Quranic mistakes and then deception. And then you're going to finally, with probably the most devastating, the fatal mistakes. 7 different categories through this series. We're going to unpack each one, show how much damage they do, and really see what the original Arabic really meant, which is really what everybody wants to know, doesn't it? That's exactly what you want to know about any text.
Yes, and we know now from the discoveries of academics that the Quran might be the first Arabic book. So of course you want to go to the oldest Arabic possible to crack the code, not to the sin of the people who came later from Persia who do not know anything about Arabic.
For those who don't know what Murad is talking about, the sin is a standard Islamic narrative coined by Dr. Yasser Qadi in that infamous uh, interview that he had with Muhammad Hijab on June 8, 2020, where he turned to Muhammad Hijab and he said, "Your standard narrative has holes in it." What standard narrative? Standard Islamic narrative. SIN. Sin. And that's what Murad's referring to. The sin, the standard Islamic narrative, that which all the Muslims are dependent on to know what Muhammad did, what he said, and how Islam began. That standard narrative, Islamic narrative, has holes in it. And this is a huge gaping hole that you're taking us through this time.
Yeah, people will really enjoy this, but they might be frustrated a little bit because they will see how these translators they fooled the West for so long.
To be fair, though, Murad, you can't really blame them because I'm sure Arbery and Drog and others like them who even Sale when he did the translation, all he had was a standard Islamic narrative to find out the meaning of these words. That's all he had all they had at their disposal. You, however, don't need that. You, however, are not dependent on that. You are the first to actually go back and look at the words as they are in their original context, in their original environment. And what you're going to find and what you're going to share with us, you've come up with 40 really glaring mistakes. Am I correct?
Yes, and these mistakes are present in every Quran translation. This is not that I am looking at this guy and leaving that guy. This is a general consensus of the translators.
Now,
They are
Murad,
all, they all make the very same mistakes. They are copying from one another, copying from the standard Islamic narrative.
there you go, which stands to reason. Now, Murad, you're also doing one other thing, and that is you have now finished your translation of the Quran, going back to the original text, using the phrases, using the words, using the context, using the meanings of these words from the 7th and 8th century, the original meanings when these were first written down. And you have made that available to everybody. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, right now there is only a sample of my Quran translation. It's for free. That's for people to get because if they are skeptic or they think that this work is not of high value or something, they will be shocked right from Surah 1 and also Surah 2. It's Surah 1 plus part of Surah 2. They will be shocked. So they should download this free sample and then they will change their mind definitely.
You can see right down here below, we have the free sample. I just go to that URL and pull it down and just read it for yourself. This is what Murad is saying. You're going to be shocked. Why are they going to be shocked, Murad?
Well, almost every single word in Quran translations are different than in mine. For example, I don't have the word the people of the book. This is an assumption. The word ahl means qualified. It's like those qualified of scripture. It's different than people. And ahl also means family. So it could be the family of the scripture. Maybe it's referring to the family of Abraham or something. I don't want people to be in this prison of the sin standard Islamic narrative and don't think for themselves. I'm empowering them with this translation, ultra literal translation, so that it progresses the academic progress in the years to come. You see?
This is exciting. This is new and this is groundbreaking. Now, of course, this is the first this has ever been done. Some of you may disagree. That's fine. We know that this is controversial. We know that in some ways this does confront everything, especially you Muslims, everything that you've been told to believe about your book. And of course, there are many people who have read the Quran in English and they've looked at the translation and they have always accepted the translation is there. Those of you who are Arabic, you have accepted the Arabic meaning of those words because that's what you've been brought up with. That is the modern standard translation in Arabic or meaning in Arabic. This is going to confront an awful lot of what you've been brought up with. We understand that. But listen, this is just the beginning. This is the first time that you'll be able to see it, be able to hear it. It's already been done up on your own site, Murad. And you've also, I think, you've gone up on other sites to have also introduced this. But this is the
Yeah.
first time in such a big site that now the whole world's going to be able to see it and be able to unpack it. And we're not going to do it in just one video because that's too big. We're going to break it down in manageable bites, 10 to 15, at the most 20 minutes, so that you can unpack it, so that you can come back to it. But this is the introduction to show you, to introduce you to Murad. Murad is a good friend. We've done much work together. Mel and Murad are two people. We're on the same team together. We work together. We've done many videos together on many different subjects, but always, 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 haven't we, Murad? We've always gone back to the historical context of that time. Haven't we done that?
Yes, exactly. And actually, the first one who opened this was Robert Spencer himself with Did Muhammad Exist? But as you see, when he made his translation, of course, I respect the work that he did, but he is also relying on the standard Islamic understanding. So it's not that his work is not important, of course it is, but my work is different. It's much different. So the word jihad, for example, yes, today it means wage war against the unbelievers. Today. How do we know this? We know this from the sin. But the very like primitive meaning of the word, it's exhaust them. You see? How did it turn to be wage war? This comes from the Sunnah, comes from the sin, comes much later when Islam had an empire. You see?
There you go. Oh dear, this is sounding fun already. I'm going to really enjoy it, folks. You're going to enjoy it. Let's get right into it. I'm going to close down this introduction to give you just whet your appetite, but don't stop there. We're going to start putting these up and you're going to see, follow with us. We've got a PowerPoint and you'll be able to use the PowerPoint. You'll be able to get it as well. We'll make it available to you. But folks, sit back. Let's listen to Murad. Let's see what he has found. Let's look at this. Has been 2 years in the making. He's finally come up with his translation, and let's see where he now will take us. Murad, any last words before we end out this segment?
No, I ask the people to just watch this series, and I ask them to not assume knowledge because there is a lot of surprises that they did not know existed. So that's all I have to say for this segment.
Great. All right. Murad, you're thousands of miles away. I'm here in the United States. We're right next to each other, even though Zoom does that for us. The next episode, then, we're going to look at some of the clumsiness or lack of detail in many of the words that were used in the modern translation or the Arabic, the way they translated Arabic. But remember, when it was done in its original form, it was not clumsy. So you need to know what we're talking about. You need to come with us. God bless you. Thanks, Murad, for coming on board. Well, until we see you in the next episode, this is Murad and me, over and out.